he's a very good man, and he can. He got a very good lead because I didn't lead for me once. And no further from me, I give you Rick.
My name is Rick, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Rick.
I'd like to thank somebody for inviting me here tonight. I'm not quite sure who that was. I forgot all about this thing, and I seen my name on a lead sheet. And so I decided to dress up a little and show up and see what happened. Let's start this meeting with a serenity prayer, because I could like really use some. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Well, it's been suggested that I let you know what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now in a general way, and I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. But I can kind of start out where I had my first couple drinks when I was like 14. And I had them with the permission of my parents, who neither one of them were drinkers. They'd have a couple, maybe a couple times a year, but those first couple drinks I had was this, out of this big blender. It was a frozen daiquiri, and I pretty much downed the first one and was looking for that second one right away. And when I got that second one in me, it was like I found magic. I was, at that age of 14 where I was just uncomfortable with everything. I don't know what it was like for anybody else when they were 14, but I was just uncomfortable in my own skin, and a couple of drinks, and it was like, I have a sobriety date. That's important to me. It's all day long. It's today. But the other date that's really important to me is like my second birthday, April 8th of 2005. I'm 56 years old. I was born in Akron, Ohio, to a mother and father who stayed married the entire time, 64 years when Dad passed away 3 years ago. He was almost 92. I had an older brother. He was 10 years older than me, and back in the 60s, he was labeled with that name we don't use. I don't think we use it anymore, at least I hope we don't. It was called retarded. He could not go through school as normal people could go through school, if there's such thing as normal people. But he was put in a special class, and what little I remember is that him coming home on the bus almost every day crying from being picked on and bullied. And I now know it as a resentment. I carried a resentment over that kind of treatment of a person for years, and I didn't know how much that was hurting me till you guys taught me that carrying that kind of thought processes or mindset, was hurting me. I took off really quick. It was the 70s, and to get it over like really quick, to be really honest, not candy coated, I did a lot of drugs, lots and lots of drugs. But I started with alcohol. I ended up with alcohol. I thought at one time when I got rid of that pipe and that needle that my problems were over. I could manage my life, and I could manage a little pot, and I could manage a little alcohol, and I found out the hard way that did not work for me. I am a real alcoholic. I'm not part alcoholic. It's not just my liver. At one time I thought it was, because I was told by the doctor my liver was like failing, and I thought, well, my liver just can't handle the alcohol, but I can. And that didn't work either. I would go into blackouts, man. I didn't even know what a blackout was, except, well, for example, when I had my driver's license, and I had it maybe a year, and I remember waking up in my bed, and my mom was not happy with me. And I seem to remember coming in late at night and knocking over a table and knocking some pictures off the wall, and she's like, Rick, where's your car at? I'm like, I don't know. And I went fumbling for my glasses, which I really, without my glasses, I can't see past my hand, and I couldn't find my glasses. And I thought, well, I'm going to get my shoes on, and maybe I can go look for my car and my glasses. And I didn't have my shoes. I had lost my glasses, my shoes, and my car. and mom did not think any of that was funny. I graduated high school. I think I graduated when they just handed me a diploma, and they kind of like said, take this, leave, don't come back, or we'll have you arrested. And I did go back the next year and found a party spot behind the school, and they did arrest me. They meant it. Springfield Police Department came and got me. Mayor's court. But it was just drink trouble, and I never made the connection. Just didn't. Right after I graduated high school, I met a young lady from Greene. Her name was Debbie. She eventually became my wife. We were married 20 years. In 1976, I went to Springfield High School and graduated in 75. And I had my best friend in the car. Debbie was sitting in the middle. I was driving, and I was heading south on Canton Road by Sanitarium. That's where that high school is. And we had the 12-pack or a case in the car and the bong, and we were having fun. I was having fun. It was a party. It was like one of the first icy snows of the year, and I neglected to see the red light at that intersection in time. I hit the brakes a couple times. It wasn't enough, and I plowed into a station wagon. It had a mother, a father, and a 2-year-old child in it, and I put them all in ICU over Christmas. I did not get arrested. I did not really feel the pain of that, because when the pain of that accident happened and what I'd done to other people, how do I cope? Well, I learned to cope by treating it and medicating it with alcohol and drugs. That's just how I handled it. That was my solution to that problem. And that went on for years and years and years. Alcohol and running to the party, running away from the people that love me, running to the party. There was an older gentleman one time at one of these parties. He said, Rick, when this is not fun anymore, we need to stop. And I agreed with him. And when it wasn't fun anymore, I found out I could not stop. It seemed like I could for a while. Or I could seem to manage it by not drinking whiskey anymore and just sticking to beer. And it seemed to work for a little bit, and then there'd be more problems. I always had this great idea that if I just changed something, I'd be able to handle my partying life. And it would seem like it worked for a little bit, then it would fall apart again, over and over and over. I eventually married this young lady named Debbie. My daughter was 18 months old when we got married. She was at my wedding. I kind of have a tendency to do things backwards. But it was a beautiful thing. My wife had went off the birth control and didn't tell me. So I had this surprise, I'm pregnant, and I wasn't real happy about it at first, but I can tell you right now, my daughter's 35 years old, and I got 2 wonderfully beautiful grandsons. One's, I think, 9 and one's 13. And if that was a mistake, it was like one of the best mistakes I ever made. You know, 30 years of partying, and there was a lot of love and beauty in the first 10 years of my marriage. I mean, I have those memories of it sometimes just being wonderful. And I have memories of parties where we just turn into something really, really ugly. You know, the fights, the breaking of windows, the breaking of dishes. But after that first 10 years, it started getting really ugly. I couldn't hold a job for very long. I couldn't keep a place of residency for very long. It just seemed like every job or every place I lived, the time I was there just got shorter and shorter and shorter. It's like, and you know, I'm building up this list of problems, not just out on paper or bills or the outside stuff, but a list inside me of how I'd conned my mom and dad out of money, or when I'd stole from my daughter out of her piggy bank, you know, and I'm keeping this stuff inside, and when it would come up, how do I deal with that stuff? Well, I drink. That's what I do. And all this stuff was building up inside me, and I really didn't know what was building up inside of me. And the first time I think I asked for help well, my first trip to detox was in 1998. I do remember that. And I don't remember much about maybe 3-4 days there and being walked to the door, and I believe one guy said, Ricky, don't drink. And I went, okay. And I walked right to the nearest gas station and got me a couple cans of malt liquor, thinking somehow I could manage it. I got cleaned up, I got detoxed. Okay, I'm smart enough, I got enough willpower that I got this. And it seemed to work for a few days. My first treatment was in '98 too, after a couple of trips to detox. I went to Raymar. I'd already been on the methadone program for a while. So I also had a opiate addiction. And the reason I went to Raymar is because the community health center had caught on that I had not quit drinking. And they give me kind of an ultimatum. You were either going to detox you off this methadone, or you got to quit drinking. And apparently you can't, so we're going to detox you, or you can go to Raymar. And that's why I went to Raymar, to stay on methadone. And I graduated Raymar, and it was during the winter, actually the holidays of '98 and '99. And when I had a chance, I'd go out to a meeting and run down the street to the gas station and get me a 40 ounce of malt liquor and sneak it back into Raymar. And at night I would draw the bathtub full of water and set that 40 ounce up on the bathtub and thinking I have it made here in treatment. And I graduated, and I walked right out of Raymar, right to the nearest gas station, and began drinking again. And me and the wife had separated by that time. Those years are kind of foggy. That's one reason I stopped and paused for a minute, because those years are still pretty foggy. I do remember calling my wife, Debbie, from that treatment center, and just with things like, we need to get back together. You made vows, you made promises, you need to come back, and can't you see that I'm doing all the right things? And I've been sober a month, and I'm like laying this all on her, and it was like I look at it now like taking a ball-peen hammer and just beating myself in the head with that phone. I guess I could call them unrealistic expectations by now, the way I see it now. And I come out of Raymar, and I had nowhere to go, and my mother and father took me, and they had an apartment on White Pond Drive, and I got a job at a car wash, and I was ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of hard work now, but at that time I was ashamed that I was working at a car wash. See, I had worked at places like Gojo and worked my way up the ladder. I've worked at places like where they had a laboratory. It was called American Ultra Specialty, and I was an assistant lab manager. And I thought that made me some kind of big shot. And all of a sudden, I'm working at a car wash, and it somehow made me feel like I was less than. I know those feelings are false now, but that feeling of less than or more than, I think we can term it here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Many people say that egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I felt around just about anywhere I went, that I was either better than or less than. Thank God for this program who made me the right size. I'm not better than or less than anyone. I mean, at one time, if I'd have felt like a zero, that would have been an upgrade. Because I was less than zero, at that time when I was, and I liked the car wash for one reason: they give me tips, and there was a Circle K across the street. So every time I got a couple dollars, I went and got something to drink. And eventually, the boss, the manager, he walked up one day and says, "Ricky, you can't even drive a car." And I thought I was doing just fine, but a couple customers complained that I was staggering around trying to drive a car, and there was a man named there, his name was Tony, and he was a member of CA, and I had to go somewhere, and Tony had heard something about IBH, and he hauled me out IBH, and I do remember he reminded me of this years later. He said, "Yeah, I followed you up that driveway, going, Ricky, pull your pants up." Apparently my pants like falling down around my ankles or something, but I was loaded. I don't really know what happened, but I found out, you can't walk into IBH loaded. There's like a process. You have to go like the ADM or something, but I think he dropped me off at my mom and dad's house. And when I left Raymar, I requalified for the, I stayed on methadone, and I worked at that car wash, after I come out of treatment for a little while, and I remember being at that car wash when 9/11 happened in 2001, because we watched it on television, when those Twin Towers come down. And that was September 11th. September 15th, I don't know what day of the week it was, but I didn't work. And I know it didn't work because I was on White Pond Drive, and the gas station was a mile away. And anytime I got a couple dollars, I walked up to the gas station and got me some malt liquor. If I didn't have a couple dollars, I stole it. And I had got a couple, 40s in me, and I come back to my mom and dad's apartment, and there's my mom sitting in her chair in front of the TV, but she's weeping, and she's like crying really hard. I mean, she's just, just a mess. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, Debbie's dead. And I went, no, God, that's what I wanted back so bad was, my wife of 20 years, she's dead. And Mom's like, sit down, just sit down for a second. I'm like, no, I can't sit down. I got to go for a walk. And I start walking, and I find myself at that gas station getting as much to drink as I can possibly get to drink. That's how I handle things. That's the only way I know how to handle things. That was my solution. But it didn't seem like I could find any relief in that bottle anymore unless I was like drinking myself into a blackout or a pass out. And from what I've been told, within 1 week, I'd been found laying in the middle of White Pond Drive at night, just passed out. Now, there's one thing that, Alcoholics Anonymous has restored, and it's a sense of humor. So I can look back on some of this and find some of it just a bit amusing. And the part that I find kind of amusing now is I don't know what all you know about drinking on methadone or opiates, but I didn't always get sloppy drunk. Sometimes I would just be drinking and just go, well. And that's how I ended up in White Pond Drive. And the paramedics would come along and they'd be like, hey, you okay, bud? And I'd stand up and go, thanks, man. And I'd walk off, and they had gotten the information out of my wallet and somehow got a hold of my dad on the phone. It's like, we just found your son in the middle of White Pond Drive, and we shook him a little bit, and he stood up and thanked us for waking him up, and he walked away. Is he epileptic or something? It's like, no, but he has some other problems. Well, the community health center, was catching on to that drinking on their program again, and they talk to me here and there and tell me that, risking my life, and I'm thinking I'm just getting a good buzz. And now I know drinking on that stuff, it can kill you. And the one day I went in there, and it was kind of like this thing here. I'm standing on that side, and there's a little machine over here, and the pretty young black nurse, she's kind of new. But she looks at me and she goes, I'm going to have to breathalyze you. And I'm like, okay. But she'd already drawn up my dose. So as soon as she turned around, I reached over there and I grabbed this thing and I downed it. And she turned around and she went, oh. She flipped out, and I'm going, we're good now. And she called Helen, the head nurse, and the head nurse brought me into her office and said, if you ever do that again, you'll be off this program. There'll be no detox. And we need you to stay here for 3 hours to make sure you're going to be okay. And I'm thinking, I'm okay. I'm really good now. But I did. I stayed for 3 hours, or they were going to throw me off. And eventually they did. They started detoxing me. And even the Dr. Rice, he got me in the office one time and says, Ricky, you just can't quit drinking, can you? And I didn't have an answer. Because, we've given you some breaks that, your wife just died, but I don't know what words you're using, but you can't keep playing that card. And it's like, we're going to detox you, or you can go back to Raymar. I'm like, I'm not going back to Raymar. And they did. They detoxed me. And my solution to being detoxed was to drink more. And when I got down to a 0 dose, I was drinking a lot. And I was living at the Haven of Rest. And they would let me know, you can't stay here. They would try to work with me a little while. But when I wasn't making any progress or wasn't able to stop drinking, they said, you've got to go. Well, I eventually did plead my case, and I went to Raymar, and I seen the doctor in the parking lot that, was the head of the methadone program. I'm like, Doc, I'm here, man. Can you like put me back on? I mean, you've got to. And he goes, no, once you're detoxed, federal law or state law or some kind of law says you can't be put back on the program for 6 months. I'm like, I am out of here, man. I can't do this. There's no way. I am not going to be this sick. And he's like, come here. There are some things I can give you. I can give you this patch for the withdrawal. I can give you a little Darvocet. There'll be some Paxil. There's another I had this list of stuff they were giving me, and I decided to stay. And I made it about a week before I was supposed to get out of there, and they gave me a pass to go look for housing. And I ended up at an old friend's house, and it was something to drink, and they were smoking those rocks, and that's the way I came back to Raymar, half in a bag, my eyes up, and I walked up to Miss Gwen and went, I screwed up. She goes, oh, I can tell. And they had like processed me out of there, but not quick enough because I had some money in the bank. So I'm just pretty sure that you need to get me out of here really quick, give me my money because I got things to do now. I didn't really understand what was happening to me until I came to this program, and it started being introduced to the doctor's opinion, that obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. And when I started getting a little bit of that, I started going, I'm really not that bad of a guy. I've got an illness. And I started getting that a little bit, and I started hearing things like, I'm not a bad person trying to get good, I'm a sick person trying to get well. And I lied and I cheated and I stole, but that didn't make me a liar, cheat, and a thief. I've always been a human being. What I do doesn't make me who I am. And it started to give me a little bit of relief. I'm not a bad person trying to get good. I'm a sick person trying to get well. And I started losing some of that self-defeating talk that run around in my head over and over and over. You're a worthless piece of... And you're always being a loser. And it started to change a little bit, but maybe not enough. But yeah, I had to leave Raymar. And I went back to Mom and Dad's house, and I worked at the gas station a little bit more. And eventually ended up in treatment at IBH in 2003. And I was starting to get hungry for recovery. And I completed a 140-day stint there, but I didn't know where I was going to go. And at the last minute, I was at a meeting at this Community of Christ Church in the basement, and I was talking to some people, or I might even stood up and asked about housing. And somebody got with me after the meeting and said, you can call this church. I know they have a men's house. And I called from IBH to the church, and a woman came out, and she interviewed me. And I don't know where it came from. I got a little honest with them. It wasn't like my habit. But I told them I didn't believe what they believed, and I was pretty sure that just kind of disqualified me for a Christian recovery house because I didn't believe the way they believed. And they brought me in, and they never preached to me. And now when I look back, they were reaching me where I was at. They didn't have any shoulds or shouldn't. They would say things like trust the process. And one of the men there was on the team of that house. His name was Roger Reynolds. He eventually became my sponsor. And I didn't even know he'd become a sponsor. I was just at his house one day, and somebody called me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm at my sponsor's house." I was running to him. He got connected with me, but I couldn't connect with his 30 years sober. I really couldn't. And I do remember making a connection with him, and goes, "Rick, I know what it's like to be lonely and not wanting anybody around, because it was like that feeling that you kind of have that you really can't describe, but it's kind of like, because if you really knew me, if you could really see me, you wouldn't like me, you couldn't accept me, and how could you possibly love me?" That lonely, dark emptiness of being lonely but not wanting anybody around. Am I talking to the right group? A complete, utter isolation that started out as a party, started out as a solution, started out as fellowship. It turns into something so dark and ugly it can only be described as a living hell on earth. And that's the man I started running to. And I was in that house for nearly a year. And we'd have house meetings. Oh, man, when I signed up for that house, I had all kind of things I didn't think I had to do. Go to church 3 times a week, go to 2 meetings, get a sponsor, but didn't have one. I had to get one, and I had to talk about step work and no TV and no smoking in the house. And I eventually had a bedroom in the basement, and I got a TV, and I smoked in the house. But I got a job, I got a bank account, and that's what I talk about. And when they talk about steps, I say, yeah, I've done 1, 2, and 3, and I did to the best of my ability. And they say, well, have you called your sponsor this week? And I'd say, oh, yeah, and I probably ain't called him for 2 weeks. And I'm lying to them, little by little. I now know that is the process of relapse. But I didn't know it then. So when they started pressing me about what am I going to do with steps 4 and maybe 5, and started talking about that a little bit, and they'd ask me week after week, as we had Monday night meetings in the house, accountability meetings, and I didn't have time for it. You know, I had to get a bank account, and I had to do this. I had to get it work, and I had to get a license back, and I had to get this job, and I had to get money stacked up, and I didn't have time for that stuff. Why would I need it? You know, I mean, shoot, I didn't understand it, so if I don't understand it, I'm pretty sure I don't need it or it won't work for me. That's the way I thought. So I now know I was in the process of relapse for at least 6 months before I picked up. I had this job, and I was working 70 hours a week, and I began to hate my boss, and I began to hate the job, and I couldn't do the job, but I wasn't going to tell them, because I had to work with very fine measuring devices, calipers, and other things. I had these goggles on, like I couldn't read it right, and I'm faking it. And then one day at the recovery house, I walked out of that job. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. I quit. I didn't tell anybody I quit. I just walked out. And that night when I went to bed, the mind started rolling. I need a little relief. Just a little relief. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to take $50, and that's all. And I started out the day with 2 malt liquors, and I was almost dead in that recovery house by 3 p.m., 2 hours before the house meeting. So I'm down in that basement. I'd already hit the ground. I mean, I started out drinking, but I had a pipe and a needle. And I did a load that sent me right down to the ground. And when I got back up, next thing I remember, they're going, Rick, you coming up for the meeting? And I'm going, oh, no, I'm not coming out of this basement, not like this. I'm sick. I'm not feeling well. I had something bad to eat downtown. And I remember those 2 guys coming down with a cup, and they wanted me to pee in it. And I went, I can't do it. I don't have able to do it. And they let me stay that night, and that was a very long night in my bed. What had I done? They know. Do they know? They know. Should I run? Should I go get loaded? And I woke up the next morning and I called Roger Reynolds. I said, man, you know, don't you? He goes, yeah, I know. I said, you want me to pee in a cup? He goes, no, you don't have to pee in a cup, but you do know you can't stay there, right? I went, yeah, I know. So I ended up in detox, and I was there, I don't know. But they came up to see me. This man at the recovery house who managed this recovery house, they came up to see me, and they talked to me, and they talked to the staff, and they agreed, let's bring him back, which completely surprised me. They'd have me back, and they brought me back, and the next day I went out, and somehow I got drunk again. How did that happen? I didn't get it. I didn't know how it happened. I now know I didn't have a program of recovery, so yeah, the obsession of the mind kicked in, and then I was compelled again to have one, and once I had one, I couldn't stop. Then I came back I was like going back to the house, and I was on the bus, and bus came early, so I have like part of a 40 in my coat, and I put it in my coat, and I get on the bus, and my roommate gets on, he sits next to me. Oh, Lord, have mercy. I've noticed once you're in recovery, you ain't getting away with shit. And so I made it to the house, and I went to my room, and I put that bottle somewhere, and pretty soon my roommate comes up and says, here. He hands me the phone, and I go, hello? He said, this is Roger. Tim says, you've been drinking. Nope, not me. He goes, so Tim's lying to me? Yep. Oh, Lord. I eventually managed that recovery house, and I have guys like pull that on me. Same thing I did. I'm like, nope, not me. I ain't loaded. Well, anyway, I had to leave again. And Roger was very nice about it. I went to Haven Arrest, and he come to visit me a couple days later. And he stopped by, and he only spent like 10 minutes, but he gave me $5. I'm like, this man knows me. I'm going to drink on this $5. But he said, get some cigarettes or whatever you want to do with it. And he left, and they get me out of the Haven Arrest again. It's February 2005. And man, it's freezing. It's dark, and I don't know what to do. Oh man, I can't believe I'm in this boat again. I'm up the creek again, and I started walking across that high level bridge, toward Detox on North Hill, and I stopped in the middle of that bridge, and I looked over the edge, and I spit, and I spit because I just wanted to see what it would be like to fall, because maybe I need to do that, because I can't go on like this, without it, and I can't go on with it. But I made it across that bridge. I mean, I was like thinking there's food there, it's warm, they got some Librium, Librium I can get by like doing push-ups or something, make my blood pressure high. And but I'm pretty sure that Roger stopping by with that $5 meant somebody cared. There was a lot of people that cared, but in my mind there was only one person who I knew that cared, that I could connect with. And that's what I did. I got the Detox, and I called Roger. He says, man, I'm glad to hear from you. Ended up back in IVH. 2005. And the pastor who run that recovery house, his name was Pat Barrett. And I knew he'd come out to IVH twice a week, and it came that time he would come before dinner or something, and I thought, I don't want to see this guy, and I'm pretty sure he don't want to see me, man. Like, I've been in his house twice, and I've screwed up twice, and I'm like kind of like trying to avoid him because here he comes, and he sees me, and his face lights up, and he comes like running up and crap, and like gives me this hug, and he goes, we didn't know if you were gonna make it, and I'm like, hi, And it completely surprised me that he embraced me like that. And he said, well, if you complete this program, would you like to come back to the recovery house? I'm thinking, you would have me back? And I did. And I completed the program, and I went back to that recovery house. And it closed down within like a month. But I moved up on Grant Street in this one-room basement, like, just a bed and a TV and cockroaches and a lot of water. There was some water down there, and my old leather boots had turned green. But I stayed a year. I got a deposit back. I never got a deposit back in my life. I got a deposit back. And Gracie was kind of cool because there was the Air Club, and the Community of Christ Church had NA meetings and AA meetings, and I started feeling kind of okay at this church. And one of the reasons I felt kind of okay there was because the pastor had, like, I don't know, a couple decades clean and sober, and he was a member of AA, he's a member of NA, and his father, helped start IBH, Jim Barrett. And I started making a little more connection with the guys. I was like running to Roger all the time. What do I do? What do I do? What do you mean? Something in the big book says this, and I'm not quite sure what it means, and that's how it started. And I didn't care what a fourth or fifth step meant anymore. I just wanted to do it because I was scared. I call that a gift of desperation. You can call it gift of desperation, call it surrender, call it whatever you want. I was scared. I didn't care what I had to do anymore. I just wanted to do it because I found out I couldn't do it by myself. I was at a meeting the other day. It was at morning meditation, and the guy said, this thing about recovery where I'm at now, it's kind of like being a turtle up on top of the end of a pencil. I know I'm here. I'm just pretty sure I didn't get here under my own power. And I've been sober a little over 9 years. Been the best 8 years of my life, man. That first year was not all that pleasant. It really wasn't. I didn't know how to handle things. I was just starting to develop some, coping skills, like a little here and there. I had an entire life of coping skills as far as, medicating. Like you stole my cheese, I wanted to beat you up or something, or slick your tires. I don't know. I didn't know how. I didn't, And then slowly, little by little, I was finding out there was just all this stuff in me that was just going to spill out anytime like somebody bumped me. But it was mine. It wasn't about them. It was my stuff. Well, that took a while to realize that. And the death of my wife, that like wounded me severely. And it was explained to me one time, that wounds like that don't heal with time. Not for me. It was like I covered it up. Like, I don't know, if you cut yourself with a kitchen knife, my first response is like, oh, I don't want to see that. And it can get infected. But something about this process where we start doing this work and peel that onion, we start shedding some light and truth into these wounds and begin to heal. I never thought the loss of my wife, that wound could heal, but it has. And the things I did for alcohol and drugs that I thought I'd never tell anybody, which was part of my relapse, back in 2003 or in 2005, I never did that fourth and fifth step. Those things I was deathly ashamed of that I was never going to tell anybody. Eventually I started telling Roger. We started working that out. And a couple months ago I had this memory of one of the most horrible things I ever did. And one of those things would have me looking at my shoes and just feeling so ashamed. And I smiled. I thought, why would I smile? And it came over me. That shame had completely left me. How does that happen? It happens in the program Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how it happens. There's that saying, don't go into the darkness without a flashlight. Me trying to do the fourth and fifth step alone, all I was doing was going into the darkness alone. And it was kicking my ass. Pride says I don't have to, and fear says I better not. Thank God for Roger Reynolds. And there's been a number of things that's been wonderfully happening in my life. And there's a guy that did this one saying, what do you say? He says, a good day is staying sober all day. A great day is when all that shit hits the fan and you're still sober. So yeah, I've been diagnosed with Hep C. And I had that. I was like 3 years sober when that happened. But there was a man, I was managing a recovery house. I did it for 5 years. I lived in that house, and I seen like 50 guys go through. But one of the guys had been diagnosed with leukemia just several weeks before that, and that's who I went to. Because he stayed sober after he got that diagnosis. So I got this diagnosis of Hep C. I had just enrolled in school. I was going to go to school up here at Herzing University, Akron Institute, for a medical assisting, and I had to have my blood tested. And they said, well, you got to go get your blood tested. And the doctor said, well, you've got Hep C. Now we'd like to do another blood test that will identify the strain and the viral load. So I went back and had the blood pulled. And they lost it. They lost the blood test. They lost the results. I don't know what they lost. They lost something. So I had to go back and get more blood drawn. And it's like, oh man, come on, let's just do this. I don't know what we got to do, but let's find out what we got to do and get a plan going. And I go back for my results, and the doctor comes in. He's got a little bit of accent, and he's like at this clipboard, and he's going negative, negative, negative. Sometime body push all the way out. I'm like, oh, doctor, please kiss me, And he like backed up because I wanted to give him a hug and a kiss, and he wasn't having it. Anyway, yeah, it was like really, really cool. And I went on to go to college for a 2-year associate degree in medical assisting, and I got an A in hand washing. I got an A in blood draws because I can find a vein on a spider. And I was helping teach a class on how to draw blood. and what I call 12 steps, there's one way to term that. It's called 12-step empowerment. Number 1, I'm going to die. But that's not the end of the story. Because the next 11 will bring power into my life. And I graduated top of my class with both honors of community service and academic achievement. How cool is that? And in like 1988, I was like not having a rest. I was like hanging out at the Akron City Hospital and drinking in the stalls and smoking in them and shooting up in them and bumming money off people and I got arrested there. I mean, I was in a stall and I was smoking a cigarette and drinking a 40, which is just brilliant. But there was a knock on the stall, and they're going like, Ricky, come on out of there. I'm like, how do you know my name? And they had been in my backpack, got my ID out, and I had a warrant, so they hauled me off. But right before I graduated as a medical assistant, you had to do an internship, like so many hours, like a month or something, and I became an intern at Akron City Hospital in the emergency department. Same place I got arrested at. How cool is that? Where's that happen? But AA. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I was getting sick. I was losing weight, and I didn't know why. I went from like 180 down to 159, and during the end of my internship, I had to ask for extended hours. I mean, like I was working 8 hours, but I was like getting these cramps. I was losing weight, and I was in pain a lot, and I got diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease. And I tried working at a gas station. I had to support myself somehow, but the pain would get so great to the end of the night, I was screwing up the books, I was screwing up the money, I couldn't even count cigarettes. And I had to quit. Well, they told me I had to quit. It's like, Rick, you're being honest. We're redoing your books every day. We see where you're being honest. I mean, like what you screw up, you pay for, and you want to pay for it, which is like complete turnaround for me. That's not me. That's how we work here, I guess, because it's not my idea. But it's like, okay, I can't. I can't do this. And I was getting really ill. And I went back to school to talk about the loans, and they're like, well, what about coming back to school? And I said, I can't sit in the classroom. I sit still too long. My pain builds up. I can't handle it. And they said, well, we have a new online school for a bachelor's degree in healthcare management. And you wouldn't have to pay back your loans, but you could, continue your education and maybe work on your health. And I did that. And last May 2013, I graduated again with 12-step empowerment with both honors. And I had this like sash on me and this like gold rope, and like, you got to be kidding me. A drunk like me, oh Lord, how could whip me away? But even before I had the graduation, I got this call from one of the teachers who was organizing the graduation. And he says, Rick, with the staff like votes about graduation and having a student speaker, would you like to do that? And I went, oh my God, no way. You want me to speak at my graduation? And I had to meet him at school, and he brought me in front of the dean. I'm standing there, and he looks at the dean, and he goes, yeah, Rick still got that deer in the headlights look. Like, you can't freaking believe it. No, I really couldn't. I was like, I got homeless, helpless, crack-smoking, drunken junkie is going to like give this graduation speech, and I had to do it. And it really didn't have a title, but it does to me. It was called the Spirit of Unity. Because at that school, when I first started going, they said our greatest asset is each other, and I said, I know that one. I learned it in AA. Working with others, saying I don't know, I need help. ASK, Ask Saving Kit. Then you got the big book and a program. I mean, like the big book, like what? BIGBOOK, believing in God beats our own knowledge. Yeah, my own knowledge gets me loaded. Every one of those steps reverses the way I think. I mean, there's that step that says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. I didn't operate that way all my life. I made a list of people that hurt me and they were going to pay for it. That's the kind of mindset I had. And it still shows up. But these steps turn my thinking around. Because I'm an alcoholic. What I do is drink. So I need something bigger than me. Something that changes the way I think. So I don't think my way into a drink. And that's why I keep coming back. I am wired to drink and use. I just am. And if I quit coming back, that nature will come back and I'll die. But for so long I was, in denial. Drinking was my solution. DENIAL. Don't even know I'm lying to myself. Steps. Solution to every problem. Sober. Seems to work. About a year and a half ago, when I was at the end of my college run, I had two of the toughest classes I ever had. Mom fell and broke her hip. I was in pain. I was getting in this pain cycle. Pain, stress, lack of sleep. Lack of sleep, more stress, more pain. And I was like losing my mind. Well, I really wasn't losing my mind. I was really going deep into it, which is like I lose my mind, I'm much happier. But anyway, I didn't know what to do. I stood outside Portage Path. I stood as a walk-in for a couple of days. I called my pastor. I made an appointment. I got a hold of my sponsor. And between all that, the two most important things I think I recognize is all my good recovery habits were starting to take a back seat. And just like I heard other people say, that's what happened to them if they make it back and don't die. Their recovery habits were taking a back seat. I was working less with others. I was going to less meetings. I was getting up and hitting the road without praying. And I recommitted to recovery. Whether I was going to graduate or not, I was going to survive. And I was going to be happy, joyous, and free relatively if I didn't graduate or if I did. But my school, it became my higher power. Because that's where my focus was. That's what I needed to be okay. And I couldn't see it. Thank God you guys were like starting to show me that I was in deep trouble and I was headed for another drink or the psych ward. When I called a friend after about 2 weeks, and even the counselor at Portage Pass says, "What do you do for fun, Rick?" And I go, "There's a couple things I do for fun, but I haven't done them for a very long time." Well, it's getting toward 9 o'clock, and I don't want to hold anybody hostage here. But I have a favorite story, and it's told to me by the late Tom Q, which was a resident of my recovery house. Church's recovery house. But I met him in Raymar in 1998, and eventually we lived together in that recovery house. And we were in the backyard one day, and he says, there's this story that kind of gives you an example of how AA works. And he told it to me. He said, there's this, drunken, hopeless, helpless drunk wandering through the night. He falls deep into this hole, and no matter how hard he tries, he can only climb halfway up, and he falls down, crawls halfway up, and falls down. And out of desperation, he cries, "Help, help, 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 somebody help me, please." And a doctor comes along and says, "Oh, man, that looks bad. You're in deep trouble, but I don't know how to reach you. But you look pretty depressed, so maybe I'll write your prescription." And he floated it down to him. Maybe you can get that filled when you get out, and he moved on. And the alcoholic, the drunk, is in that hole, and he's crying again, "Help, somebody please help me." And a holy man walks by, and he looks down in that hole and says, "Son, man, that looks bad, but I don't know how to reach you. But I'll pray for somebody to come along who can." He's screaming for help again. "Help, help, somebody please help me." And a recovery alcoholic comes by, and he looks down in that hole, and he jumps down in it, and the drunk says, "What'd you do that for? Now we're both stuck down here." He goes, "It's all right. I've been here before. I know the way out." Thanks for listening.